Hey everybody, welcome to another video. Happy Friday. I hope you guys had a great week. So, I'm going to be talking about the books I read this week, which are two books, and I really enjoyed both of them. This was a very good reading week. I read a sci-fi and a fantasy, and I've talked about these two books in my November TBR, so I'm just going to go into more in-depth detail now that I have read both of them. So let's start with the sci-fi one, and this one is basically the Sirens of Titan, which I had mentioned on my TBR by Kurt Vonnegut. Again, I'm sorry, I always say this, sorry if I mispronounce the name of the author. So this is my only sci-fi read, is going to be my only sci-fi read for November, so I had high expectations, and fortunately, I basically, I was not disappointed. It actually exceeded my expectations, and I really enjoyed this book. Um, it basically hit me at the last page, like when I was reading this book throughout the time. I was like, okay, where is this going? Interesting things are happening, all right. But then, like, what is the meaning of this entire thing? But then when I finished the book, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. Like it's that type of reading, and it's very nice. Uh, this is absurdist fiction, so it's basically, it talks about the absurd. The plot elements are exaggerated, they're very unrealistic, they're very random, like you just get hit by random things and you're like, what? How does this even make sense? But it has its own logic to it, and it's just a very funny book. It's like satire. It's I would say it's kind of like dry comedy in a way. It's basically I want to try to give you the plot without really spoiling anything. It's basically about uh, two people, well, one person, to be fair, and then we have like another side character, which is the female. But there's this like one guy who is basically tasked to go to Mars, and this guy is sent to Mars alongside this female, and he has to somehow plan and he has to partake in an invasion from Mars onto planet Earth. Why is this invasion taking place? Uh, we initially don't know. We're just going with the flow, and we just see how these people who are partaking in this invitation are extremely brainwashed. They had their abilities taken away from them. They have these little, like, they had their memories erased, and they basically have these little antennas on their heads. So anytime they disobey an order, they get hit with excruciating pain. So they were basically dumbed down to just do what their superiors want them to do. One person in particular who wants them to, to partake in this invasion to prove a point and to do something, basically. So we follow this character on throughout this like journey. He doesn't even know why he's doing what he's doing. We're just going with him. We're just seeing the absurdity of it all. And then eventually, when the invasion like takes place, we find out why this invasion happened, what was the plan all along, and we're just like, oh my god, like it's just all senseless. Like I know I'm being a bit vague, but it basically explores the idea of senselessness. Uh, in the end, like what we're doing throughout this book is that we're just trying to figure out what the meaning of life is. Uh, we basically don't know what is the purpose of being, what is the purpose of existence. So we're just trying to create meaning out of life. And then eventually, at the end of this book, when we find out the true intention behind everything that happened in this novel, uh, the real reason why this invasion took place and what triggered it, we just think, oh my god, we are just so you know stupid in a way, because we kind of feel like we tend to give deeper meaning to life than there is. We tend to over complexify life in a way. We tend to look for meaning in a way that is very obsessive. We just try to always believe that there's a grand scale, grand scheme to things, but then eventually things are not that deep. Some very benign, stupid thing can be the cause of, huge, destructive things in the future, and we humans just try to create meaning where there is none. So at the end of the book, we're just wondering what all of this is for. What is the point of all this? So this is what this book is exploring. It basically explores this idea of meaninglessness in a very nice, comedic, funny way. We just laugh. It's basically a book where you want to read when you want to laugh at yourself as a human, right? We laugh at our humanity. We laugh at all the things we do, all the wars we wage, all the struggles we partake in, and in the end, what is all that for? You know? So if you're into that type of thing, I highly, highly recommend this book. Uh, it is a book where the idea is the predominant force. So basically, you have to be interested in the idea of the book to be able to appreciate it. It's a very idea-heavy book, but the characters are very, entertaining and funny. Uh, like I laughed a lot during this book. It's very dry. It makes you think. It's dry in a comedic way. It has dry comedy. It makes you think. It makes you ponder on things. And yeah, it was just so enjoyable. The last chapter, the epilogue, basically, it just, tore my heart to pieces. I was like, oh my God, this is so sweet. I just really loved it. And it made me decide to give this book a 5 stars. Again, I really wish I could talk more, but I don't want to spoil the book. I still want you guys to enjoy what the book is about, and discover it for yourselves. But I highly recommend you read it if you're into sci-fi, and if you're into sci-fi that explores, this idea of what is the meaning in life. It's a very good sci-fi. It is based on different planets, basically. So we go from Earth to Mars, and then we go from Mars to Mercury, and then we go from Mercury back to Earth, and then we go from Earth to one of Saturn's moons called Titan. So we have we cover a lot of, space in this relatively short novel. And I love that diversity, and the world building was very good, you know. I especially liked Mercury's moon and Titan. These two worlds were, in my opinion, very nicely built. Uh, and it was just so interesting. For example, we have creatures here on the one of Mercury's on Mercury. Yeah, it was on Mercury. Was it one of Mercury's moons? No, it was Mercury. So on this planet, we have creatures that basically they are brainless creatures that hang on walls of caves, and they basically get nourishment out of music. So the more music you give them, the more they, enjoy themselves, and the more they grow and the happier they are. And if you give them too much music, they would die of ecstasy. So we have these types of weird, strange creatures that are so interesting to read about. So I really liked that. I think they were called Harmonians, if I'm not mistaken. Harmonium. Very interesting, choice of creatures. So I really enjoyed that. I love the mix between extraterrestrial life and human life, and it's just, it shows us how vast and big the universe is in a way. And at the same time, we always try to ponder what the meaning is. My takeaway from all of this is that life has no meaning. We just have to create our own meaning by, being passionate about things. This is my own takeaway from the book. So yeah, I'd be really curious if you guys read it and let me know what you think. So this is a 5-star sci-fi read for me. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It was so good. I can't stop talking about it because it was just so amazing, an amazing book. So yeah. Now, the next book I read, I had actually finished before this one. It's basically The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin, and this was a reread. Now this is a Jemisin book that I adored. You guys know, if you've watched my previous videos, that I've read The City We Became, and I didn't really like it. It wasn't my type of book whatsoever. However, The Killing Moon, amazing, amazing book. It's pure fantasy, based on in a totally different universe. Has nothing to do with ours. But a lot of research went into it. So basically, in the Killing Moon is basically fantasy. It's ancient Egyptian inspired fantasy. Very nice, nicely written, very nicely crafted. Uh, Even the names are basically, they sound ancient Egyptian, and in the book, Jemisin has mentioned, like on a disclaimer, that she basically tried to copy ancient Egyptian names without actually using the actual names themselves. So she made, similar variations of these names, and I found that to be very interesting. So I briefly touched on this in my previous video, but this basically talks about a city. It's called Gujare. I'm sorry if I'm, not pronouncing it correctly. Gujare, that's how it's like spelled. It's basically a city ruled by peace. It's a city that is ruled by a group of, religious people who worship a goddess called, again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hananja, if I'm not mistaken. And this goddess is basically the goddess of peace, the goddess of tranquility. And, this city has been so well governed by peace, by this religion, that we barely hear of any crimes taking place in the city. We barely hear of any violence. We don't hear of any protests, any riots. Everything is peaceful. It's tranquil. The people are very docile. And we basically have people who these people, they fully believe in this goddess, right? So a part of it is devotion, but another part is it also comes from fear, because in this religion we have priests who basically use a form of magic, which is dream magic. So in this world we basically have more than one realm. We have the realm of reality, the physical realm, and then we have the realm of dreams. And whenever we sleep, we basically go to that realm. And the idea is that when we die, uh, we cross over to that realm entirely, So we have priests who use dream magic, and they basically, whenever they get an order by their higher, superiors, that a person is corrupt, has committed crime, has done something that is unethical, they are basically sent to gather that person. So these priests are called the gatherers, and they are sent to gather the person. What that means is that they basically, whenever that person is asleep, they come into the room and they enter their dreams in a very gentle way, and they give them peace. By that I mean they weave a very beautiful paradise in that dream that the person is having, and then they don't like to use this word, but they kill this person, they end this person's life. So when this person is dead, all that they know is that, that paradise that has been created for them. Now, it's a very interesting idea of magic, and these priests mostly, they really believe in the righteousness of what they're doing. Uh, but then other people who are not members of this religion, uh, they kind of see this as murder. They basically see it as, you're basically removing, or taking away someone's life without their consent. It's a very perverse form of justice, because yes, some people are actually killed in that way because they are corrupt people, but then you have others who are deemed corrupt by the authorities, even though they might not be corrupt or their actions might be justifiable. However, when the authorities rule that this person is corrupt and has to die, the gatherers, they basically commit this sentence without any question, no questions asked. They just go and they, end this person's life. So we basically, in this city now, we have a foreigner who is basically part of a much larger city, which, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not really good with names, as you might have noticed. It's called Kisua, I think. I'm not sure. Uh, but it is like another city which does not follow this religion. It has separated from this religion a long time ago. And one of the ambassadors of that city is in Gujare, and she is spying basically for that city to give information, because they are suspecting that there's foul play involved in this city, So which is indeed true. There is foul play involved because one of the, one of the gatherers in that city, we don't know who, has went like to the dark side. So basically, whenever a gatherer, works for a long time, for long years, his energy becomes depleted, and he eventually has to be killed as well. So, but this one gatherer, he wasn't killed, and he went rogue. Basically, he went to the dark side, and now he's what we call the Reaper. So this Reaper would have tremendous power and can murder thousands of people and like take away their souls in an instant like this. So it's a great threat, and this Reaper is being used by a mysterious force to basically, uh, wreak havoc and uh, work under somebody else's agenda. So the mystery here is we have to figure out who this person is. We follow two people. We follow the main gatherer. His name is Ehiru. He's a very good gatherer. He's very morally disciplined. He has very strong opinions on things. And he has been working for years in this profession. He really believes in the righteousness of his cause. And then we also follow his apprentice. His name is Nijiri. And Ehiru has basically saved Nijiri when he was younger. And there is a very strong bond between the two, which I find to be very interesting. Like it's a bond that kind of mixes, a paternal bond between a father and son, a brotherly bond, and somehow even like a romantic type of bond. Like the nature of their relationship is very complicated in a way, So that dynamic is very interesting, and we are basically seeing these two people trying to figure out what is going on. And it's especially difficult for Ihiru because this person, he really fully believes in the righteousness of his, of this priesthood, of this religion. So, having to come to terms with the fact that there is corruption happening within this religion itself is very traumatizing for him because he's a very rigid person. So we are basically dealing with this storyline here. The writing is beautiful. I loved it. This is a reread, so the first time I read this book, I wasn't really sure what I thought. Like, I gave it 3 stars because, I was expecting fast plot. I was a, kind of a novice when it comes to fantasy, kind of. Like, I was more used to very heavily plot-driven fantasies, so very reflective fantasies kind of, bored me, and I was always wanting to get to the action very fast. But now that I have more experience with those types of books, and when I read this one, I reread this one, I really enjoyed it because it is reflective. Like it really explores the concept of, trying to understand that sometimes religious authorities can be corrupt. Sometimes the systems we have grown to believe that are just are unjust, and sometimes when the entire foundation of our belief is, shaken to the core, it's broken, we can either not accept that and basically still go up through the corrupt path, or we can accept that and change and be flexible with our ideas and bring reform, So it's a very interesting dynamic here, very interesting ideas being discussed, very interesting themes, with a very, with a very ancient Egyptian type of feel to it. Uh, so yeah, it was amazing. Like the cities are basically in the middle of a desert, right? So there's a huge desert between these two cities. And we have Gujare, which is this like sleepy, dreamy, peaceful, place. And then we have Kisua, which is the rebellious city, which has broken free of this religion, and it's basically, potentially under threat now. We don't know, we don't know what is going on, because a lot of things are going on between these two cities, and we are basically exploring that mystery. So yeah, very nice read. I'm gonna bump my rating up to 4 stars. I'm gonna be reading the sequel soon, like hopefully this coming week. I'm gonna be reading The Shadowed Sun, which is the sequel to this duology. and I would have finished reading the Dream Blood duology. And I'm hoping that the Shadowed Sun is even better, if not as good as, the Killing Moon. And I'll keep you guys updated on that. So these are the two books that I've read. Really enjoyed them. I had a really good time. I had a really good reading week. So I'm very happy about that. If you guys read these books, and if you watch this video, let me know in the comments section. Tell me what you think about these books. Tell me if you're interested in reading about them. Tell me what you think about these, the themes that are discussed in these books. And I will hopefully see you guys next Friday for a new video. And yeah, I wish you guys a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.